What is up, y'all? It's Bernadette Joy. And if you are someone who considers yourself to be a first generation, meaning that you are going to be the first one to maybe go to college, the first one to make six figures, the first one to become an entrepreneur, the first one to decide to not have kids, whatever you are the first of in your family, if you are that person and you want to learn more about how you can claim freedom for your life, and how you can make the money that you need to live that life, watch this video. I hosted my friend Jannese Torres from Quiero Dinero podcast in Charlotte for a live chat on how she was able to pay down her debt, leave a toxic marriage, start a podcast that now has way over a million listens, and just released her book, Financially Fit. And I'm sure you'll take away some good lessons. Let's get into it.
We're super excited to be here today to be able to introduce Jannese Torres. She is a money-making chain maker. She is also the creator and host of an award-winning podcast, Yo Quiero Dinero. And she's out here to revolutionize how we see money.
My name is Jannese Torres. I am the author of this beautiful book, Financially Lit, The Modern Latina's Guide to Level Up Your Dinero and Become Financially Poderosa. And it is the most comprehensive book written for specifically the Latino community. When I was doing the market research for this book, and they asked me to look at what are the comparables out there, I couldn't find any, literally. There's books written by white men, Black women, white women, but for some reason there was not a personal finance book written for and by Latinas. And so I kind of made it my mission to do this. I've been a podcaster since 2019, and I entered this space because I felt like there was a lack of representation in the conversation around money. And it has blown up now to a 5-time award-winning podcast that let me quit my job. I've been doing this full time for the past 4 years, and the incredible opportunities that podcasting has brought me have led me now here to this moment. And I'm really excited for folks to just get a new perspective on money, and one that is culturally relevant and based in compassion versus the shame and the guilt that is such a hallmark of mainstream personal finance. Let's talk about making money. So this is actually a passion area of mine. I'm a content creator now over a decade in a lot of different spaces, genres. I started as a food blogger. Now I'm a personal finance podcaster. And in that whole time, I've seen just the power of showing up as yourself online and the ability to actually make money from that, which I think a lot of people don't actually believe you can. And one of the things that I have found has been the proven formula for success, at least for me, has been leaning into what makes me me. So leaning into my Latinidad, leaning into the fact that I'm a first gen, leaning into the fact that I was financially illiterate. I think a lot of us want to start off on the internet pretending like we're experts. And that's where you get a lot of those fake gurus online who are like telling you they've figured out the secret sauce, but they haven't done anything. And so for me, I find that it helps people connect with you when you share not only your wins, but also the journey and the struggle and the losses. And that has been for me the most impactful thing from a business perspective, because it makes people realize you're not some like talking head on the internet. You're like an actual human being. And when people can relate to you, they trust you. And when they trust you, they pay you. So that's where I would start, is really figure out who you are at your core, who you are authentically, who you can show up for as that person, and lean into that. Because nobody on the internet wants you to be perfect. They want you to be you, because that's how they connect. I think the thing for me, which is funny, because when I launched my podcast and called it Yo Quiero Dinero, people were automatically like, well, does this mean I can't listen to it because it's like so specifically marketed to Latina? And we have listeners from every age group, ethnicity, gender identity, everybody that you could imagine listens to the podcast, because we're all fundamentally trying to just figure out how this money shit works. At the end of the day, money impacts every single one of us, regardless of your background, regardless of your age, regardless of your education, socioeconomic status. This is an area that's almost like an even playing field for people. There's no such thing as learning about money too much. So once you've learned it, once you become proficient, start talking about it to your friends, your family, give them the book, tell them about the podcast. And I think most importantly, practice what the book tells you to do. Sometimes we can become perpetual students, but in order to actually make financial changes, you have to put those things that you're learning into action. So once you start learning, start doing.
How many of us sometimes get stuck at learning and then don't do the do part, right? The best thing that you can do when you get valuable information is to apply it.
Can you share a key lesson from your own financial journey and practice steps from Financially Lit that listeners can apply to achieve financial independence?
My journey has been one that has had many twists and turns. So I want to first preface it by saying none of this is linear. We have starts and stops and mistakes and ebbs and flows and all of that. And still, we figured it out. And I think having the patience with yourself to understand that this is a marathon and not a sprint, I think is the first thing that I would recommend. Financial independence specifically is definitely a marathon. It is not something that's going to happen overnight. And when you first find out about it and you first calculate your FIRE number and you first get a clue that this might be something you want to pursue, your normal reaction is going to be like, oh, hell no. You mean to tell me I have to save how much? I have to pay off all my debt? Like, what are we talking about here? And so understanding that it's going to take several intentional steps to get to a place where at some point you can say, I made it. It's just important to be realistic. When I first found out about FIRE, it was like 2016. I had just bought like a $500,000 house. I was in tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt. And when I found out that there was an alternative option where I could retire in my 40s versus working at this job that I hated until I was 60 something to pay off this house, I was like, oh my God, I just made like a bunch of huge mistakes. How am I going to undo this? I did everything possible to not make this a reality. And when you find yourself in that position, it can be very easy to just be like, well, somebody else can do this, not me. And I did things that people did not understand, like selling my house 2 years after I bought it at a loss. Okay. Didn't even make any money. I moved 1,000 miles away from where I grew up. My family was losing their minds. They're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I'm like, well, I want to go somewhere where there's a lower cost of living, where I can still make the money that I'm making, but not have to pay income tax, not have to pay $3,000 a month for my mortgage. And I made a lot of conscious steps. From the outside looking in, people were just like, this girl's gone off the deep end. But now I'm in a position where I was able to walk away from my job. I have enough money invested that I can retire at the age of 65 and never have to invest another dollar again. I don't owe anybody money. I actually now own real estate out front, like cash. I bought with my content creator business, even though it's not a real job, right? So I just had to get really in the zone and focused to not worry about what society and everybody else's perception of what it is that I want. I know why I'm doing what I want to do, and that's what keeps me focused. And I would recommend that when you start making like crazy ass financial goals, don't tell everybody, because not everybody's going to get it. You got to get around spaces like this where people actually get it. And, make some cool friends in the money world that'll keep you encouraged because it's a journey.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that. So I'm Filipino, and I learned that the same word in Tagalog is the same word in Spanish as chismes, right? Chismes is like the gossip, like the rumor mill. And I always found it really hard to get past the chismes because there's always, especially when you start climbing, this is the hard part that people don't understand. When you start having the kind of success that Jannese has had, somebody always got something to say about it. And I would love to tell you that it's just easy to let it roll off your back. How do you do that? So I'd love to ask you, what's some chismes that you've had to deal with? How did you deal with it?
I don't know if it ever goes away, because you're always going to get those comments from people where it's just like, well, that must be nice. Good for you. Good for you is like such a trigger phrase for me, because it's like, it's instant hater energy. Like anybody that tells you good for you is not actually happy for you. And usually you're going to get that from the people who are closest to you. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have this preconceived notion of who you're supposed to be, whether that's like your career choice or whatever. They just have this idea of who you're meant to be. And then when you start to challenge that, they don't know what to do with it. I realize I'm never getting those comments from people whose lives I want to live. So like, why am I worried about it? The people who actually I aspire to will be the most encouraging people. They're not going to be the ones that are shitting on your goals and dreams. So just understanding, it's fine. I see you in your low vibrational energy. That sucks for you. I have an alternative. You want to listen to it, but I also can't do that mindset work for you. And I think that's why I talk so much about mindset in the book too, because before you open an investment account or you start a business or anything that's quote unquote out of the norm, you have to first believe that you're worthy of wanting to achieve these things, even if nobody else around you has done it. And that tunnel vision, sometimes it's just so important to remember it's not about them, it's about you.
Not about them. Right? It's about me. It's not me.
And that is like, those people will always ask you, well, how'd you do it? So just wait for that.
I love it. And so not everyone might have heard of the term financial independence. So do you mind clarifying what that means?
So it's a complex world, but essentially what it means is that you get to a place financially where you are no longer reliant on a paycheck. So you are independently wealthy. A lot of stock investments that you can live off of. You have passive income streams through entrepreneurship or real estate or a combination of those things. You're basically work optional. And so financial independence for me represented getting off the corporate treadmill, if you will. It's honestly something that I feel like way more communities of color especially need to be talking about, because we're so used to just seeing people work until they die. And there's no need for that when there's such access now to financial literacy information. There's so much access to investing in ways that like our parents could not. You can download an app on your phone and start investing. There's really, the barrier to entry is so low now to start building wealth that more than anything, I think the single biggest thing that's driven my own journey forward is just learning how to relentlessly pursue money. Like being unapologetic in your pursuit of wanting to earn more. And if your career doesn't give you that opportunity, then getting into the world of entrepreneurship, getting online, learning about all the different ways that you can make money, that's going to be a really powerful way for you to accelerate your financial independence journey by just a paycheck. And when I got out of that mindset that like my job needs to pay me enough to make this happen, it changed the game for me, because you realize the power that you have to actually create your own wealth when you don't limit yourself in that way.
You and I have talked at length about how both of us have multiple degrees. So do you mind just sharing what were you doing before this so people can understand?
So this was not part of the career plan. I was actually pre-med in college. I opted out of going to medical school when I was a senior because I just realized, I'm going to have to get into $500,000 worth of debt and be in school for 8 years on top of college and everything else. So I graduated with a degree in molecular biology and chemistry. I've always loved science. I always loved understanding how the world works. And so I worked in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and consumer manufacturing industry. While I was working, I got a master's degree from Johns Hopkins in biotechnology. And so I thought that was going to be my career because my father's an engineer, and I thought I was just going to make a ton of money working at big startups and Fortune 50 companies. I think part of the reason why I experienced this was because I graduated 6 months before the Great Recession. I saw people getting laid off left and right. I saw folks having 30 minutes to pack their things after working in a company for 25, 30 years. I saw people no longer being hired as full-time employees, but contractors, so they didn't have to get benefits. And it was like a huge wake-up call for me that I'm like, maybe this American dream that I've been sold is just more of a fucking nightmare, to be honest, because that's what I experienced. And so I think very early on in my career, I would say like by year 5, I was like, this is not it. I can't do this for another 40-something years. I don't know what the alternative is going to be, but I started learning about the world of online entrepreneurship and content creation, and it set me on a path to now be here. The Latino community is not a monolith. And so I don't pretend to try to represent everyone because my experience is unique in the sense that I'm Puerto Rican. So my parents were born American citizens, even though they were born in Puerto Rico. And that's not something that anyone else from any other Latin country can say. The fact that there are folks in our community who are undocumented, who are here, who can't work traditional jobs because they don't have the paperwork for it, that's not an area where I try to pretend I can be an expert because I'm not. That being said, there are definitely unique cultural aspects at play when it comes to being part of the Latino community. A lot of it has to do with generational trauma around money. Many of us have experienced poverty for multiple generations. And so there's a lot of trauma around finances. You know, many of us have seen marriages break up over money, abuse over money. That be the thing that kind of controls the family. And so many folks walk into adulthood and start earning and are terrified. And they can become hoarders. They can become kind of the people in their family who are now seen as they have to be the life raft because maybe they're the ones that are getting paid well and everyone else is still struggling. So that can be, you're kind of self-sabotaging yourself at that point, giving away everything that you've earned in order to help everybody else out. There's a lot of mental health aspects of it too. You know, mental health is not an aspect that we talk about in our community. It's very much still stigmatized. And there's a direct correlation between your mental health and your financial health. What I found is that the more that we normalize these conversations in our community, the less people feel like it's unattainable. And so that's why I feel a personal responsibility not to just share my story, but so many people's stories on the podcast. I'm very intentional about curating a group of people on the show as guests who are from communities of color, because we just need to see that this is possible for us before we start to actually believe
That. Can you share a little bit about how the podcast started? Because I find that fun. And 5-time award-winning, way past 1 million downloads. How did it start?
So I tend to have my best inspiration in the shower. So I had been listening to podcasts for like 3 years at that point, and a lot of personal finance podcasts. And I was just like, I cannot find anybody from my community who's talking about this. Where are they at? And I think the way that my brain is programmed as an engineer, you know, obviously I was trained to like find solutions to problems. And I found the problem, which was there's nobody talking about money who's Latino. And so one day I'm listening to Cardi B and J-Lo's song Dinero in the shower. And if you've heard the chorus of the song, it says, yo quiero dinero. And it was like a divine download. Literally, I ran out of the shower. I hopped on my laptop, Googled, does this exist? It did not. I went and downloaded the Anchor.fm app, which is now Spotify for podcasters, and went and got all the social media handles and said, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but this idea is too good. And here we are. That's how it started.
Yeah. How much was your microphone?
Oh God, it was terrible. I think it was actually like using the headset from work to like start the podcast. No, I was actually using the little plug-in Apple earbuds, not even the wireless ones. It was the corded ones. And I was recording it on my phone.
In the attic. So remind you, if you're waiting for having all the equipment and having all the idea like ready to go, speed matters more than accuracy. Speed matters more. So I love that.
My name is Clay. How do you stay connected with your audience and ensure your podcast is financially lit and meet your needs and interests?
Well, I think events like this, which, you know, for me is still relatively new because I did start my platform during the pandemic. And so for a couple of years, we were just locked at home, and it was hard for me to get a sense of like the actual impact of the show until I started coming out into the world, and like people started telling me their stories, and folks would start crying when they met me, and they're just like, oh my God, I'm having a moment. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is weird, you know, because I don't consider myself, God, like celebrity. No, none of that. It's just, you know, I'm just somebody who decided to create a show where I could hear stories that I needed to hear back when I was starting my journey. And so, yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is just realizing that none of this would exist if it wasn't for every single one of you who has listened to the show, subscribed, shared, told people about the social media stuff. Like, that's what reminds me every day. And I know I started the show because I needed these stories. And so that's always my focus. Like, you can't pay to be on my show. You can't pitch yourself to be on my show. Like, I have to do my research. I have to know you personally. I have to be inspired by your work. I have to invite you on the show. And that's how I maintain like the integrity of what we're doing, because that for me is the foundation of everything.
Yes.
I'm Heather. Who has been one of your most impactful guests on the podcast, and what
Ooh.
specific insights did they share that influence Financially Lit and can benefit our audience?
I would say my sister. So my sister is actually my behind the scenes person who literally handles all of my podcast stuff, my guest things. She is, I mean, the woman has like 13 jobs and she doesn't complain, and it's amazing. And the fact that we get to work together now because of this business I created is just insane. The reason why I say her is because the original version of this book did not have the chapter on love and money, where we talk about financial abuse and the importance of protecting yourself financially in a relationship. And she's actually a domestic violence survivor. And so experiencing that firsthand as a family was my first introduction into how important it is to have financial independence, especially as a woman. And so I think, obviously without her story, I wouldn't have even had the thought to put this topic in the book, which is so relevant and so, I think, relatable to a lot of people. And she has a podcast called Watch Us Thrive, where she now shares her story and stories of other domestic violence survivors and helps them kind of get to the other side of that. I love that.
And her sister is indeed a badass.
Number 8, balancing multiple commitment. What is a practical tip you have for managing the demands of podcasting, writing, and other professional or personal commitment?
I'm actually very good at saying no. I think in the beginning, especially when you're a content creator, it's very easy to feel like if you say no to everything, like everything's going to dry up and all the opportunities are going to disappear. What I've actually found is that not everything's worth your time and not everybody's willing to pay you for your time. And so for me, I'm just now very intentional about not doing low return on investment activities. But it just has to be worth my energy and time at this point. I've gotten a lot better at working less and making more. And I think people would think, well, that doesn't make any sense. But when you actually charge what you deserve, you will make a lot more money. And you'll actually show up way better, like energetically, for those things that you do say yes to, because you're not pouring from an empty cup. I also am not a one-woman show. So I have folks who I've outsourced writing my blog. So I'm not writing that myself. I have an agent who handles my brand deals, so I'm not having to waste time negotiating contracts and things like that. I have an accounting firm who does my financial stuff. So when there's areas of my business that need the support that I'm not able to give it, I'm good at outsourcing either with software or people. I've had enough examples of what it looks like to just deplete yourself, especially as a woman. It's very common for us to see just many examples of women who give and give and give and give, and they have nothing left for themselves. And I'm not willing to repeat that cycle. And so that's kind of the ethos of how I operate at this point. If it feels like too much, you're not paying me enough. If it messes with my peace, it's not worth the price.
What was the best challenge you faced when writing your book, and what actionable strategy did you use to overcome it that our audience need to know about?
Well, I got a divorce while I was writing a book. So no big deal. And the reason why I sit here with you today and I didn't have to go back to a corporate job and lose all of my savings and everything I've worked for is because I had a postnuptial agreement. And so for all my folks here who are either married or thinking about getting married, protecting yourself financially is something that I cannot harp on enough, because one of the things that was so eye-opening to me in the divorce process was because I maintained my financial independence during the marriage, I did not have to worry about how I was going to pay my bills, where I was going to live, how I was going to feed myself. I could just work on myself. And there is something very powerful when you can just focus on getting on the other side of that, and you don't have to worry about how the hell am I going to afford my own apartment, because now I got to split my bills. Now I'm responsible for everything. That's a very vulnerable position to be in. And there's so many people who are stuck in relationships because of the financial aspect of it. So I would say, even if you're happily in love, if you're building a financial empire, please get a prenup or a postnup and maintain your financial independence, because you just never know.
On a different note, I saw that someone is making a garden for you at home. So can you share about that?
I can, yes. So I'm happily now in a new relationship that is very healthy, and also a non-conforming relationship, which is something that I've had to battle with from a cultural perspective, because he's 7 years younger than me. I'm the breadwinner, and there's a lot of comments that can come with that when you're not following the traditional route. But I had to, the same way that I kind of shut shit off when people are not living the lives that I want, I had to operate in that same way when it came to putting myself back out there and looking for what I wanted in a relationship, because I knew I'm always going to be a rich bitch. So I'm going to have to find a man who's okay with that. He's going to have to get over it. That's one of those things that I think is unique to women of our generation who are out here You might be the breadwinner in the family, and people are going to have things to say about that. But at the end of the day, we're not going to dumb ourselves down and get small for other people to feel comfortable with the life choices that we make. That just means partners got to step up and get over it, because it benefits all of us at the end of the day when women make more. Yeah. Obviously, our intention is all to raise rich kids, because why would we perpetuate the struggle? We already know what that's like. So for me, I think it's important, if you are the parent who is setting up your kids for generational wealth, it's not enough to just build the wealth for them or help them do it. It's important to teach them how to be good stewards of this, because there is that statistic that says that by the third generation, the wealth is gone. And most of the time, it's because you don't actually pass on those good money management skills. You just say, hey guys, here's a trust fund. Good luck, and that's not enough. So I would say understanding still the value of money, understanding that this is something that they have to be competent to manage, and letting your kids prove that they can handle the responsibility. I've never been a fan of just like, hey, you turn 21 and here's a trust fund. There has to be milestones and markers, whether that's you have to get a college degree, or you have to hit a certain age range, or you get a certain percentage of money when you're ready to buy your first house or something like that. Just having that, learning how to be financially disciplined, I think, is one of the most important lessons you can teach your kids.
Hi, I'm Megan. So when you were shifting from the 9 to 5 traditional, I got my degree, when you were shifting from that mindset and into your entrepreneurial journey, because obviously all this money didn't just land in your account. So how do you stay disciplined when you don't quite see the end result yet, but what's coming?
First and foremost, you have to understand your greater why. You can't just be, I want to make money, because that's never going to be enough of a reason. And I learned that when I had this goal in my corporate career to make 6 figures. And then when I made 6 figures, I still hated it. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is not what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be happy now. So it can't just be about the money. It has to be, what does this lifestyle provide you from a tangible perspective? Do you want more time to spend with your children? Do you want more disposable income? You want to be able to work seasonally and take more time off. But like, what's the actual reason why you want to do this? And who do you want to help? Right? So you have to get clear on those things. I think it's also important, again, the same way that your personal finance journey is a marathon, so is entrepreneurship. I was not making any money for the first 3 years, and people would think like, well, how do you keep going? Well, I didn't have the pressure of having to make it work right away, because I didn't quit my job and then try to figure shit out too. I definitely recommend doing it as a side hustle, proving it, repeatedly, making sure that you have something that's consistent before you decide to take that leap. And for me, it took 7 years to get to that point where I felt comfortable enough that I could replace my salary. I had a number in my head that I need to make this amount of money consistently on a monthly basis for at least 6 months before I can say with confidence, I have a system that I can replicate. And then instead of using my paycheck to pay my bills, I was investing in my 401k and maxing that out and building up an emergency fund and getting rid of debt and using that money to basically give me a really long runway, so that if things didn't work out, I would at least not be starting from zero. Also thinking about like, what are you going to do for benefits? Because that's a real reason why a lot of us have jobs, health benefits, retirement and whatnot. So making a plan for those things as well is important, because it's going to cost you money to give up those things. It's like jump out of the plane and figure out how to deploy the parachute on the way out. I'm like, start this as a side hustle, see if you have something viable. And one of the things that makes that difficult, obviously, is time. You have all these other responsibilities. So this is when you have to start giving yourself permission to outsource things in your life, whether that is hiring somebody to clean your house a couple times a month, or outsourcing your laundry, or using Instacart instead of spending 2 hours grocery shopping. Like, all of those little moments of time that you can pick up are then going to allow you to invest into your business and not going to drain you, because just because something has to be done doesn't mean you have to be the one to do it.
Awesome. Great question. Oh, can you just remind people how they can support your book again?
So come on over, leave your review, share the book. It's available in audio as well as hard copy. So if you know somebody who can use this, give it as a gift. Get your Christmas gifts early. Nobody's going to be mad about you trying to teach them something as a gift, because Lord knows we don't need another thing that's going to collect dust in our houses.
Ta-da! If you like this content, please go ahead and check out my latest project. It's the Crush Your Money Goals book, and it will be available for purchase December, but now you can get it for pre-order and you can learn the 25 money habits that will help you save, invest, and plan for financial freedom the same way that I did and was able to retire by 40. Check it out at crushyourmoneygoals.com.